Beneath the cold embrace of an endless night, a forgotten railway station sits cloaked in a veil of heavy fog. The sound of distant footsteps fades into silence, swallowed by the chill air that carries a faint, ghostly whistle, soft, yet piercing enough to stir an unease deep within. The station's name, long worn away by time, remains unspoken, as if even the wind refuses to remember it. The crumbling stone arches cast long, jagged shadows under a pale, flickering light, dancing like specters to an invisible rhythm. Somewhere, faint and almost imperceptible, the metallic scrape of wheels on rusted tracks lingers like an echo of the past refusing to let go. Tonight, this place is more than forsaken. It feels alive, watching, waiting. What if I told you that this railway station harbors a darkness beyond imagination, where whispers speak of a conductor long lost, yet never truly gone? Stay with me, and we will unravel a tale hidden in the folds of shadow, a journey into the elusive and the unknown. This is not just a story, it is an invitation to step into the dim light of Black Hollow Station, the gateway to a mystery that refuses to rest. But beware, once we board this train bound for the forgotten, there may be no coming back. Now, turning to the heart of our tale, imagine Black Hollow Station, standing at the edge of reason and reality, a place where time itself seems to falter. The air grows heavier here, not just with the passage of years, but with something far more elusive, an unshakable presence that lingers in the corners of your perception like a half-remembered dream. They say the station's crumbling platforms once teemed with life, bustling with the energy of travelers embarking on journeys to destinations now lost to history. But now the trains are silent. The tracks, once polished by the weight of countless wheels, lie rusted and obscured by creeping vines, as if nature itself is attempting to reclaim what remains. Yet, even in its decay, Black Hollow Station refuses to fade into obscurity. Shadows deepen unnaturally here, stretching and twisting as if alive, and the hollow whistle of the wind carries an almost melodic tone, haunting and mournful. It is here that our story begins, where whispers of the unimaginable echo among the ruins, and where the legend of the Lost Train Conductor binds the present to a past shrouded in mystery. As we stand on the edge of the platform, peering into the void beyond, we cannot help but wonder, what secrets does this forsaken place hold, and why does it feel as though Black Hollow Station is waiting for something or someone? Now, turning to the ghostly heart of this tale, Black Hollow Station emerges as a place unlike any other, a desolate relic resting on the outskirts of Cornwall, shrouded in an aura of abandonment and unease. Once a thriving cornerstone of travel, the station now stands forgotten, its fading glory overtaken by the relentless grip of time. The air here feels unnaturally cold, as though some unseen force leaches the warmth from every breath. Trains that once roared through the station with bustling energy now sit idle, their hollowed shells consumed by rust and tangled vines, as though nature itself mourns their silence. The platforms, fractured and crumbling underfoot, narrate a story of years gone by, while the faint, hollow whistle of the wind drifts through, an eerie serenade that whispers to those who dare linger. Rumors cling to the station like the mist that envelops it. Each night whispers of travelers who vanished without a trace, of shadows that move where no light should fall, and of a peculiar conductor glimpsed only in fleeting moments, a dim lantern swaying in his grasp. It is a place steeped in unanswered questions, where even its name, Black Hollow Station, seems to carry the weight of mystery and dread. It feels as though the very ground beneath hides secrets too heavy to surface, and yet the deeper one stares into its haunting presence, the more the lines between past and present blur. This is where our story begins, a forgotten fragment of the world, frozen in time, waiting to unveil its chilling truths to those brave or foolish enough to look closer. Now turning to the man at the center of this dark tale, we meet Henry Whitaker, a quiet yet deeply curious soul who has recently taken on the role of station master at Black Hollow Station. In his early 30s, Henry is not the kind of person who seeks the limelight. His demeanor is understated, his movements deliberate, and his voice rarely rises above a calm, measured tone. Yet beneath this reserved exterior lies a restless mind, one that has always been drawn to the unexplained and the forgotten. For as long as he could remember, Henry had been captivated by mysteries, the kind that lingered just beyond the veil of reason, defying logic and explanation. His curiosity, however, was not born out of mere entertainment. It stemmed from a deep personal wound. Years ago, as a young boy, Henry had lost his father, a locomotive engineer, in a tragic accident. The details of that day remained hazy at best, shrouded in conflicting accounts and unanswered questions. Some said it was a mechanical failure. Others whispered of something stranger, something unspoken. Whatever the truth, it left a void in young Henry's life, one that he sought to fill through his fascination with railroads and the stories they carried. This connection drew him to the aged iron rails and crumbling platforms of Black Hollow Station, a place whose very existence seemed to reflect the unresolved riddles of his own past. Despite its dilapidated state and ominous reputation, Henry volunteered for the post willingly. Perhaps it was the station's eerie allure, its whispered tales of the supernatural, or simply the chance to escape the monotony of his former life. But as the weeks passed, unease began to settle in his mind. There was something peculiar about the station, an uncanny stillness that gnawed at his nerves. Small things, a faint sound he could never quite place, an object inexplicably moved. The weight of an unseen gaze began to chip away at his sense of normalcy. Yet, rather than running from this discomfort, Henry chose to lean into it. Intrigue and a stubborn determination to uncover the truth fueled him, driving him to seek answers to the station's haunting mysteries, no matter the cost. As shadows lengthened and whispers grew louder, Henry's quiet life was on the brink of unraveling, setting the stage for a journey that would push the bounds of his courage and test the very limits of his understanding. Now turning to the shadows of the past that loom over Black Hollow Station, we uncover the chilling legend that has gripped the surrounding village for generations, the tale of the Lost Train Conductor. Whispers of his story float like the fog that clings to the station, persistent yet maddeningly vague. The legend speaks of Arthur Blackthorn, a beloved conductor from the late 19th century, who vanished into the night under circumstances as impenetrable as the darkness itself. It was said to have happened on an evening much like any other, with Arthur overseeing the final departure of his locomotive as it cut through a heavy veil of mist. But as the train ventured further down the lonely track, it seemed to dissolve into thin air, taking with it its passengers, its crew, and Arthur himself. Days stretched into months, and the locomotive was never found. Some speculated that an uncharted ravine had swallowed it whole, while others told of spectral forces pulling it into another world. Rumors of ghostly sightings soon followed. An apparition of a pale-faced conductor carrying a flickering lantern, glimpsed by night travelers near the woods or on the distant tracks. Accounts varied, but the detail of the lantern always remained, its glow faint yet unrelenting, as though beckoning the curious and the unwary towards some unknowable fate. Over time, the story transformed from fearful retelling to almost a rite of passage, shared in hushed tones by children daring each other to trespass on the station's grounds. But for Henry, this was no child's game. The mystery of Arthur Blackthorn was more than local folklore. It was a key, he believed, to unlocking the enigma of Black Hollow Station itself. What had happened to Arthur and his passengers on that ill-fated night, and what threads linked their vanished train to the strange occurrences that now plagued the station. These questions spiraled through Henry's mind, igniting a determination that overrode his natural caution. Though the legend warned of danger, Henry felt the pull of its secrets, both as a challenge to his rationality and as an otherworldly call he could not ignore. Moving forward, the tale of Arthur Blackthorn deepens into a labyrinth of ghostly clues and unanswered questions. The locals speak of uncanny phenomena tied to his disappearance, events that defy logic and seem to hint at forces beyond comprehension. On nights when the fog thickens and the air turns unnaturally still, there are those who claim to hear the faint echo of a steam engine in the distance, its sound not diminished by time but suspended in it, as though the train itself remains lost in an infinite loop. Others tell of hearing disembodied footsteps pacing the length of the old platform, steady and deliberate, as though Arthur himself is still preparing for a journey that will never begin. And then there's the lantern, a constant, haunting detail that threads through every account. Some say its flicker appears to guide the way, while others insist it seeks to lure the living into the shadows of the unknown, where the line between reality and illusion blurs. What gave the legend its most sinister edge, however, were the stories of those who claimed to have followed the light. They would recount how the glow seemed to grow more distant the closer they approached, leading them deeper into the woods or along the rusted tracks until they were gripped by an unshakable sense of dread. Most turned back, but a few were said to have pressed on and were never seen again. Over time, these chilling disappearances only added weight to the legend, spreading fear even as they drew out curiosity. To the skeptical, these tales were little more than the fabrications of overactive imaginations. But to Henry, who had now spent countless hours poring over every scrap of information he could find, the consistent details, the recurring mention of the lantern, the unearthly sounds, the vanished explorers, suggested something real, something tangible buried beneath the folklore. What if the stories were not just cautionary tales, but fragments of a larger, darker truth? As he stood alone on the platform late one evening, the station enveloped in an eerie quiet, Henry could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. Somewhere in the silence, he could have sworn he heard it, the faintest, most distant whistle of a train cutting through the fog. It was as if the past was reaching out, beckoning him to step forward, daring him to uncover its secrets. Now turning to the story of Arthur Blackthorn, a figure both revered and feared in equal measure. In life, Arthur had been more than a conductor. He was a symbol of steadfast reliability, a man whose cheery whistle and warm smile could be counted on as much as the train's punctual arrival. Passengers spoke of his uncanny ability to calm even the most nervous traveler, his voice carrying a calm authority that could soothe fears and spark a sense of wonder for the journey ahead. But it was on one peculiar night in the 19th century, shrouded in an almost impenetrable fog, that Arthur Blackthorn, along with his locomotive and every passenger aboard, vanished without a trace. The train had departed from Plymouth, bound for Truro, a route Arthur had travelled countless times before, yet on that night it never arrived at its destination. Search parties scoured the countryside for weeks, tracing the tracks for any sign of derailment or clues to the train's whereabouts, but their efforts yielded nothing. It was as though the train had been plucked from existence, leaving no explanation in its wake. In time, unsettling rumors began to take root. Some spoke of a spectral conductor, a figure clad in Arthur's very uniform, seen wandering the tracks on fog-laden nights. Always, this ghostly apparition was said to carry a lantern, a pale, glowing beacon that seemed to cast an unnatural light, neither warm nor comforting, but cold and foreboding. Witnesses described the figure as both sorrowful and stern, standing motionless for a moment before vanishing into the mist as abruptly as it appeared. Others claimed to hear the faint chime of his pocket watch, a sound that had once marked the start of countless journeys, but now echoed eerily in the darkness, as though time itself had lost its meaning. Then there were the darker whispers tales of something far more sinister underlying Blackthorn's disappearance. Local lore suggested the fog that night had not been natural, but a harbinger of an otherworldly presence, a force that had ensnared the train and drawn it beyond the veil of reality. Some murmured of a deal gone wrong, a pact Arthur had made to ensure the flourishing of the railway at the cost of his own soul. Others spoke of a curse tied to the land, one that demanded blood-ticketed and unknowing passengers every few generations. The accounts varied, yet they all pointed to one chilling truth. Arthur Blackthorn's fate was more than a simple accident. The train, its conductor, and its passengers seemed to have become prisoners of a realm beyond comprehension, a shadowy dimension where time loops endlessly and hope withers like leaves on a forgotten track. Details began to emerge of strange phenomena surrounding the areas near the tracks where the train was last seen. The air there felt heavier, villagers would say, as though burdened with a weight too great to bear. Animals avoided the area entirely, their instincts sharp enough to sense whatever lingered there, and on the most unnerving of occasions, passers-by would find strange impressions in the mud, footsteps that appeared fresh yet stopped abruptly, as if the walker had been lifted straight into the air. Every unexplained sighting, every unsettling sound, only served to deepen the legend, drawing thrill-seekers and skeptics alike into its orbit. But for all their endeavors, no answers were uncovered, only more questions, and the faint, unshakable feeling that something watched from the fog, waiting for the world to forget. As the years wore on, Arthur Blackthorn became less a man remembered and more a ghostly cautionary tale whispered by firelight. Yet even as his story faded into obscurity for some, there were those who could not dismiss it, who believed the legend concealed clues to a truth far more terrifying than the fiction it inspired. For Henry, the implications were impossible to ignore. Could it be that Blackthorn, far from being lost, had deliberately or unknowingly opened a door to something that was never meant to be found? Moving forward, we find Henry Whitaker, alone in the dim and dusty office of Black Hollow Station. The air feels damp, heavy with the weight of countless untold stories, as he sorts through the remnants of a forgotten past. His fingers graze over faded timetables, crinkled maps, and brittle ledgers that crumble at the edges, bearing witness to a time long since past. It is there, tucked away in an old wooden cabinet with a lock rusted from decades of neglect, that Henry discovers something entirely out of place, an antique brass lantern, gleaming faintly as though untouched by time. The moment his hands lift it from its resting place, an unnatural chill fills the room. The door creaks softly, though no wind stirs outside, and the faintest whisper brushes past his ear, too elusive to make out yet undeniably there. Henry's pulse quickens as he peers into the lantern's glass chamber, noticing an engraving on the base. It reads, "A. Blackthorn," etched in a script so precise it feels like an accusation rather than a mere signature. The weight of the lantern seems heavier than it should be, as if it carries something more than its physical form. Shadows in the corners of the room begin to shift, not with the simple flicker of light, but with deliberate, unsettling movements of their own. Henry freezes, his eyes darting across the room. For a fleeting moment, it feels as though the shadows are watching him, aware of his every breath. He sets the lantern down quickly, but the sensation doesn't fade. The oppressive silence of the station grows louder, broken only by the faint sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. The whispers return, clearer this time, though still impossible to pinpoint. They echo faintly, like fragments of a conversation carried on an ethereal breeze. Henry strains to hear them, his curiosity warring with a deeply rooted sense of unease. He steps back, but the room seems to close in around him, as if the walls themselves are conspiring to hold him in place. For the first time since arriving at Black Hollow Station, Henry feels genuinely afraid, but it's not the kind of fear that prompts flight. It's the kind that holds you in place, rooted by an inexplicable need to understand what you've just uncovered. Though everything in him screams to walk away, Henry cannot shake the feeling that this lantern is more than a relic of the past. It feels alive in a way that defies logic, its brass surface unnervingly warm to the touch, as if it has been waiting for someone, waiting for him. And so, with a sense of trepidation that borders on compulsion, Henry decides he must know more. What was a simple curiosity about local legends has now become something far more personal, a riddle he feels compelled to solve. But as he takes the lantern in hand once more, he cannot ignore the creeping realization that this discovery is not a coincidence, it is a call. A call into the shadows, into the unknown, and into a story that may have been waiting centuries for someone brave or foolish enough to follow its path. Henry does not yet know what lies ahead, but the seed of his journey has been planted, and the darkness feels closer than ever. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Henry finds himself drawn back to the station's archives, a place he had barely glanced at in his earlier days at Black Hollow. The archives are buried deep within the station, down a narrow, cobwebbed corridor that seems to stretch longer than it should. Armed with the lantern, its faint glow guiding his steps, Henry opens the heavy wooden door to reveal rows of forgotten records, stacked haphazardly and cloaked in decades of dust. Each shelf tells a story of its own, filled with the lost echoes of countless lives that once passed through this station. Henry begins sifting through the shelves, his hands brushing across the spines of crumbling ledgers and brittle papers. One by one, he examines the contents, but nothing stands out, at least not until his fingers stop on a thick, leather-bound file, its cover incongruously clean compared to the others. Inside, he finds a train manifest, dated to the night Arthur Blackthorn vanished. The names of passengers fill the page, meticulously written in black ink. Yet there is one glaring anomaly. At the bottom of the list, A name has been crossed out with such force that the page beneath is torn. Henry's mind races as he tries to make out the faint impressions left behind, but the name remains maddeningly obscured. Just as he places the manifest aside, a small object slips out from between its pages and flutters to the floor. Henry bends down to pick it up, his breath catching in his throat. It is a train ticket, bearing the same date as the manifest, Arthur Blackthorn's final journey. Yet, unlike the fragile papers surrounding it, this ticket is unscathed by time. There is no discoloration, no frayed edges, no signs of decay. It looks as if it were printed yesterday. The details on the ticket are unsettlingly vivid. The train number, the departure time, and the destination, none of which correspond to any routes Henry knows. Even the ink seems to shimmer faintly under the lantern's light, as though holding onto a secret it refuses to share. Henry stares at the manifest and the ticket, the pieces of a puzzle beginning to emerge, though the picture they form remains obscured. As he compares the ticket to the names on the list, a growing sense of unease gnaws at him. The crossed-out name and the pristine ticket feel like deliberate breadcrumbs, left not by accident but by design. The whispers return, softer now, but unmistakable. They seem to press him forward, urging him to uncover what has long been hidden. The room feels colder as Henry places the ticket into his pocket, a chill that seeps through his coat and clings to his skin. The lantern flickers faintly in his hand, its glow dimming momentarily, as if warning him of the path he is beginning to tread. Henry knows there is no turning back now, not with these clues in his possession, not with the shadows weaving themselves deeper into his every step. There is something waiting for him out there, something tied to the manifest, the ticket, and the legend of the lost conductor. And though he does not yet know what it is, the dark allure of the mystery is impossible to resist. As the next challenge unfolds, the quiet solitude of Black Hollow Station is interrupted by the arrival of a stranger. A polished black automobile rolls to a stop on the deserted platform, its glossy surface reflecting the dim afternoon light. Stepping out of the car is Edward Grayson, a man who exudes both wealth and unease in equal measure. Grayson, a towering figure with a sharp, angular face and piercing eyes, surveys the crumbling station with a look that seems to pierce straight through its decayed walls. Dressed impeccably in an expensive charcoal suit that seems out of place in this forgotten corner of Cornwall, he carries an air of quiet confidence, but there is something unsettling about the way his presence seems to draw the shadows closer. Introducing himself as a railway magnate with dreams of restoring England's forgotten stations, Grayson extends a hand to Henry. His grip is firm, just a little too firm, and his smile feels practiced, like it has been used to mask intentions too numerous to count. Grayson speaks with smooth precision, his words flowing easily, as though he has rehearsed this conversation long before today. He praises Henry for his dedication to maintaining Black Hollow, a place that Grayson claims holds a rich history worth preserving. But his gaze lingers just a moment too long on the lantern Henry clutches in his hand, the faint flicker of its light reflected in Grayson's calculating eyes. Grayson's interest in the station quickly becomes more specific. He begins asking pointed questions about the station's archives, the station's history, and most unsettlingly, the local legend of Arthur Blackthorn. His knowledge of the lost conductor seems unnervingly detailed. He recounts parts of the story that Henry had only just begun to piece together, mentioning details that were absent from the faded whispers of folklore and the brittle pages of history. It is as if Grayson has been following the same trail of clues, though his motives remain shrouded. When he speaks of the lantern, his voice takes on a peculiar edge, his measured tone betraying an eagerness he tries to disguise. "A remarkable artifact, isn't it?" he remarks, his eyes glinting as though the lantern's glow holds a power only he can see. Henry's discomfort grows with each passing moment, but Grayson's charm is difficult to dismiss outright. There is a magnetic quality to him, an ability to bend the atmosphere of a room around his presence. But beneath his carefully chosen words, Henry senses something darker, a deep, calculating intention that seems to echo the shadows Henry has only just begun to understand. Grayson's visit feels less like a coincidence and more like an inevitability, as though he has been waiting for this exact moment in time. Before departing, Grayson leaves Henry with a parting remark that chills him to his core. Leaning in ever so slightly, his voice drops to a near whisper, the words sinking into Henry like ice. "Some mysteries are better left untouched, Mr. Whitaker," he says, his tone carrying the faintest hint of a threat, masked as advice. "But if you insist on chasing shadows, do tread carefully. They don't always lead where you want them to." As Grayson disappears into the sleek black car that brought him, Henry realizes the stakes of his journey have shifted. The shadows no longer seem like his only adversary. Grayson's presence has added a new dimension to the mystery, one that feels far more dangerous. Though Henry does not yet know Grayson's true intentions, he senses that the man's path is inexorably tied to his own. And as the car vanishes into the distance, Henry grips the lantern tighter, the weight of its secrets growing heavier with every passing moment. With the next phase of the journey in sight, an unshakable pull envelopes Henry. The tension of the day lingers, but as the evening descends into a deep, spectral quiet, he feels an inexplicable compulsion to uncover the truth. Clutching the antique lantern, its glow now steady, almost as if it were guiding him, Henry steps onto the rusting tracks that stretch beyond Black Hollow Station. The air around him crackles with an uneasy energy, and a thick fog begins to curl around his boots, swallowing the ground in a pale, ghostly blanket. Each step feels heavier than the last, the world growing eerily silent, except for his own cautious footsteps. As the station fades into the distance behind him, a faint sound begins to rise through the stillness. At first it is almost imperceptible, a low whisper that could easily be mistaken for the wind threading through the trees. But as Henry ventures further down the tracks, the sound sharpens into something unmistakable. A mournful whistle. It cuts through the fog like a distant cry, carrying with it an echo of sorrow and longing that seems to seep into Henry's very bones. He pauses, his heart racing, straining to listen. The whistle fades, replaced by an unsettling rhythm, a metallic groan, like the creak of ancient train wheels struggling against time. Henry's grip tightens on the lantern as he presses forward, his pulse quickening with every cautious step. The fog thickens, swirling in unnatural patterns, twisting and folding like a living thing. Shadows dart at the edge of his vision, fleeting and shapeless, but unmistakably there. His breathing becomes shallow, each inhale laced with a growing dread. And then another sound. This one is closer. Disembodied voices drift through the mist, faint and fragmented, as though carried by an invisible current. They are indistinct, their origins unknowable, but they call to him, each word soaked in a chilling, pleading tone that sends shivers racing down his spine. Suddenly, the tracks beneath Henry's feet vibrate faintly, and a cold wind rushes past him, carrying with it the unmistakable screech of iron grinding against iron. Henry freezes, his eyes darting into the endless wall of fog ahead of him. The vibrations grow stronger, the sound louder. Closer, it is as if a train were barreling toward him, though the tracks remain empty and lifeless. His instincts scream for him to turn back, to escape the unnatural force bearing down on him, but something stronger, something deeper, keeps his feet rooted to the ground. The lantern flickers suddenly, its light shifting from a steady glow to a pulsing rhythm that seems to match the invisible train's approach. The fog around Henry begins to part, not dissipating, but moving unnaturally outward, as though pushed by an unseen force. And then it happens. The air ahead of him ripples, bending and distorting, before splitting open into an expanse of shadowed twilight. What lies beyond is not the familiar countryside of Cornwall, but a place entirely unlike it, a realm suspended between light and dark, where the landscape warps endlessly and silence buzzes with an unnatural energy. Hesitating only for a moment, Henry steps forward, crossing the threshold into this otherworldly dimension. The lantern's glow steadies once more, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch impossibly over the alien terrain. Abandoned locomotives are scattered across this shadow realm, their metal frames rusted as though frozen in agony, their forms almost skeletal. They sit silently, as if waiting for a journey they can never complete. And then, from the corner of his eye, Henry sees movement. He turns sharply, the lantern's light catching fleeting glimpses of figures, passengers, or what remains of them. Their faces are pale, their eyes hollow, their forms translucent. They stare not at Henry, but through him, their expressions a mix of despair and resignation. The air feels heavier here, oppressive and thick, and Henry feels the weight of countless secrets pressing against him. As he ventures deeper, the whispers grow louder, more distinct, their tones urgent and sorrowful. The legend of Arthur Blackthorn no longer seems like a distant story. It feels alive, pulsing through this place, drawing Henry further into its heart. Yet even as the shadows pull him closer, a question lingers in his mind. Has he been lured here by curiosity, or by something far more sinister? As the next challenge unfolds, Henry feels an overwhelming weight settle over him, as though the very air of this shadowed realm seeks to suffocate his resolve. The twilight here is not gentle, but oppressive, casting an unending dusk that makes it impossible to discern time or direction. The abandoned locomotives seem to loom like ancient monuments to forgotten despair, their rusted forms jagged and uncanny, while the silence is alive with a sinister hum that gnaws at the edges of Henry's sanity. His footsteps echo too loudly in the stillness, each sound swallowed almost instantly by the surrounding void. He can feel unseen eyes watching him, their weight pressing heavily on his shoulders, though no one steps forward to reveal themselves. And then he sees them, the passengers, faint figures standing in small clusters near the skeletal trains, their shapes barely holding form. Their translucent bodies flicker with the dim, shifting light of the lantern, and their faces, those faces, are etched with an anguish so deep it chills Henry to his core. They do not move, their hollow stares fixed somewhere beyond the horizon, as though lost in an eternal loop of despair. Henry's mind races, the reality of these ghostly apparitions clashing violently with every logical explanation he tries to muster. Yet he cannot look away, not from their mournful expressions, not from the way their presence seems to ripple the very fabric of this strange dimension. A faint voice rises among the whispers, clearer now, closer. It is not pleading like the others. It is commanding, deliberate. Henry feels it more than hears it, vibrating through his very bones. The lantern flares briefly, casting its light farther than it should, illuminating a path between the scattered trains, and there he is, Arthur Blackthorn, the lost conductor from the legend, now standing before him. But this is no benevolent figure offering answers or salvation. Blackthorn's form is tall and solid, but shrouded in an unnatural shadow that seems to breathe, curling and shifting against the dim light. His eyes glow faintly with an otherworldly intensity, his face a mask of unreadable intent. Henry's breath catches as Blackthorn steps closer, the lantern's light flickering wildly as if struggling against the darkness emanating from the figure. There is power here, raw, unrelenting power, and Henry feels it in every fiber of his being. Blackthorn's voice finally breaks the silence, low and resonant, every word laced with a chilling authority that sends shivers down Henry's spine. He speaks not of hope, but of choices, bargains, and the weight of consequence. His words are cryptic, yet they carry the weight of a truth Henry is not sure he is ready to face. Henry cannot decide if he is standing before a man consumed by his own folly, or a guardian of something far darker. The conductor's motives remain cloaked in ambiguity, leaving Henry to grapple with his own perceptions of good and evil. The whispers around him grow louder, a cacophony of voices that seem to pull at his very soul, and as Blackthorn's shadow stretches wider, enveloping the space between them, Henry is faced with the single, inescapable question, a question that could define his fate in this fractured realm. But before he can answer, the shadows around him seem to shift once more, the realm itself bracing for what is to come in the next phase of this harrowing journey. With the next phase of the journey in sight, the oppressive gloom of the shadow realm quivers as an unfamiliar presence emerges from the dense mist. Henry instinctively tightens his grip on the lantern as Edward Grayson steps into view, his silhouette sharp and deliberate against the muted twilight. The railway magnate's polished demeanor now feels unnervingly out of place amidst the ethereal chaos, his every step exuding confidence, as though the shadows themselves part willingly for him. Henry's heart pounds with a mix of confusion and dread. What could Grayson possibly want here, in a place where no sane man would tread willingly? The answer becomes chillingly apparent as the man's piercing gaze locks onto the lantern in Henry's hands. Grayson's voice cuts through the whispers, smooth yet laced with a venomous edge, as he addresses Henry with a calm authority that belies the malice beneath his words. He speaks of opportunity, of untapped potential within the shadow realm, a power that, if controlled, could rewrite the rules of existence itself. His words are calculated, each sentence a careful weave of manipulation, as he describes the lantern not as a relic of despair, but as a key to a new era, a tool to command this realm and its secrets. Grayson steps closer, his movements eerily unhurried, as though he is certain that Henry will yield. But Henry does not yield. Instead, he takes a step back, his mind racing to process the gravity of Grayson's intentions. The contrast between them becomes stark. Henry, driven by an earnest desire to uncover the truth and restore what is lost, stands resolute, while Grayson, consumed by greed and ambition, sees only an opportunity to exploit. The clashing ideologies ignite a tension that electrifies the air around them. Henry's voice trembles, but does not falter as he challenges Grayson, denouncing his plans to wield the shadow dimension's power for personal gain. Grayson's calm demeanor cracks for a fleeting moment, revealing a flicker of irritation that quickly morphs into something more sinister. The confrontation escalates as Grayson steps forward, his tone sharpening to a threatening edge. He does not plead or argue, he demands. The whispers around them swell into a dissonant symphony, as though the shadow realm itself responds to the growing discord. Henry realizes that this is not a battle of strength, but of will. He must outmaneuver Grayson, not with force, but with courage and wit. He speaks with conviction, appealing to the unseen forces that linger within the realm, as if invoking the essence of those who remain trapped here. The lantern's light flickers erratically, caught in the surging tensions between the two men, its glow a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. Grayson, sensing resistance, takes a final, deliberate step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper that carries a weight heavier than any shout. He offers Henry one last chance, a bargain laced with tempting promises and dire consequences. The air grows colder, heavier, as though the realm itself holds its breath, waiting for Henry's response. But Henry, drawing on every ounce of resolve, raises the lantern high, its light flaring in defiance of the shadows and the man who seeks to control them. Grayson recoils slightly, his confidence visibly shaken for the first time. The shadows around him writhe, their movements frenzied, as though mirroring his inner turmoil. For an agonizing moment, time seems to freeze. The echoes of their confrontation ripple outward, blending with the ghostly murmurs of the trapped passengers, as the shadow realm braces for the choice that will define its future. And as the lantern's light stretches just a little farther, illuminating the path ahead, Henry knows the perilous journey is far from over. With the next phase of the journey in sight, Henry's trembling hands grip the lantern as its flickering light casts shifting patterns across the shadowed expanse. The weight of Edward Grayson's sinister words lingers heavily in the air, but something deeper begins to stir within Henry, a resolve born from the echoes of the lost voices surrounding him. As whispers grow louder, more desperate, Henry senses the spectre of Arthur Blackthorn drawing near. The atmosphere thickens, the faint outline of the conductor emerging from the gloom, his presence both haunting and tragic. Blackthorn's hollow gaze meets Henry's, and in that chilling moment, the truth reveals itself like the unbroken silence of a midnight train. Arthur Blackthorn, once a revered figure, had gambled with forces beyond his understanding. A pact was struck, a fleeting promise of power in exchange for his soul and the lives of his passengers, trapping them all in this eternal twilight. The lantern, now glowing with an erratic brilliance, was the fulcrum of their torment, the very artifact that bound their fates to this cursed realm. Henry's breath catches as the realization settles in. To destroy the lantern would mean severing the connection, releasing the trapped souls, and ending Blackthorn's anguished vigil. Yet the cost of this act is undeniable, obliterating the only anchor tethering him to the real world, as well as any hope of returning to the life he once knew. The weight of the decision bears down on Henry's shoulders, each moment stretching into eternity as the fate of countless souls hangs in the balance. The shadow realm pulses with an almost sentient awareness, the trapped passengers' ghostly murmurs blending into a single, mournful plea that reverberates through Henry's bones. Grayson's voice cuts through the cacophony, desperate yet commanding, urging Henry to reconsider. He paints a vision of vast dominion, the power to transcend the boundaries of mortality, the chance to reshape existence itself. But Henry no longer sees opportunity in Grayson's words, only the unrelenting cycle of chaos and despair they would guarantee. Summoning every ounce of courage, Henry raises the lantern one last time, its light flaring brighter than ever before, casting deep silhouettes of both Arthur Blackthorn and Edward Grayson. The shadow realm trembles violently, the dissonant symphony reaching a deafening crescendo as Henry makes his choice. With a resolute final breath, Henry smashes the lantern against the ground. The glass shatters in a burst of searing light, illuminating the shadow realm in a brilliance that feels almost like dawn breaking after an endless night. The anguished cries of the trapped souls transform into a chorus of release, their spectral forms dissolving into the radiant glow. Arthur Blackthorn's figure disintegrates with a mournful nod, his expression shifting to one of weary acceptance as he fades into the light. Grayson recoils in horror, his defiant shouts swallowed by the consuming brightness, his form unraveling as if the realm itself rejects his presence. As the light engulfs everything, Henry feels a sudden, overwhelming stillness, a sense of weightlessness as the boundaries between realms dissolve. When the brilliance finally fades, Henry finds himself standing alone on the crumbling platform of Black Hollow Station, the cold, oppressive fog now replaced by a tranquil silence. The lantern lies shattered at his feet, its remnants dimming with each passing second. The station feels eerily unchanged, yet profoundly different, empty, lifeless, and devoid of the whispers that once haunted its shadows. Henry's heart aches with a quiet sorrow as he realizes the full gravity of what he has done. The souls of the lost passengers are free, but at a price. A piece of himself now belongs to the shadows, an invisible scar that will never fully heal. As he gazes at the horizon, the faintest sound of a ghostly train whistle lingers in the distance, an echo of a tale that will remain untold, whispered only by the wind. And though the journey has ended, the legend of the Lost Train Conductor lives on, an enigma to haunt the curious and a chilling reminder of the dangers that lie just beyond the veil. As the sun rises on the next chapter, the story of Henry's journey through the shadow realm settles into an eerie quiet, leaving behind echoes that refuse to fade. The haunting silhouette of Black Hollow Station remains, its crumbling walls now cloaked in an unsettling stillness. Henry's sacrifice, a choice born from courage and desperation, freed the lost souls but left its mark, a scar etched into the very essence of the place. The lantern, once a beacon of torment and mystery, lies shattered, its remnants glinting faintly as though reluctant to fully fade. Yet, deep in the corners of the old station office, where time seems to hold its breath, a faint flicker of light dances briefly before vanishing into the void. It is as if the lantern's essence lingers, a quiet reminder that the connection to the shadow realm may not be entirely severed. Henry himself, now a changed man, forever tethered to the secrets he uncovered, walks away from Black Hollow Station. He carries with him the weight of those haunting memories, their whispers still faintly calling from the edges of his mind. The legend of Arthur Blackthorn and the Lost Train Conductor remains a tale that will never be fully understood, its pieces scattered and incomplete, leaving room for the imagination to wander. But perhaps that is the point. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, their power lying in the questions they provoke rather than the answers they provide. And so, as the story comes to a close, the line between light and shadow blurs once again. The dangers of obsession, the lure of the unknown, and the cost of seeking truths beyond our grasp linger in the air like an unspoken warning. Who's to say the shadow realm is truly gone? Perhaps the next curious soul to wander into Black Hollow Station will hear the faint echo of a ghostly train whistle, or catch the dim glow of a lantern flickering in the dark. If you enjoyed this chilling tale and want to uncover more mysteries lurking in the shadows, don't forget to subscribe for more dark bedtime stories. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit the notification bell to never miss another journey into the unknown. Until next time, sleep well